Hey everyone, how you doing? This is Amon Green, Green Bay Packers all-time leading rusher, and you're watching Packers Total Access Live, your daily source for Packer content. Go Pack, go!
What is up? Welcome into Packers Total Access. My name is Clayton. You can check us out on packernet.com. Find me on Twitter at Packers_access. Also find our Overflow podcast channel. Wherever you get your podcast, just search Packer Fan Total Access. It is February 23rd. It's officially NFL Combine Week. NFL Draft Talk is going to continue to ramp up. We're going to get into free agency right after the Combine wraps up. And then next thing you know, we'll be here with our live stream covering the draft for every single pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. What we got on tap today, guys, we're going to talk about thresholds. We're going to talk about perfect fits, if you will. Now, listen, we're not going to lay out every prospect that's a perfect fit. We dove into a little bit of an article here from Wendell Ferreira and Brian Maffey, where they talk about some of the cornerbacks on day two that might be a perfect athletic threshold fit for the Packers. So we'll dive into that. We'll also talk about the combine schedule, what to expect this week, which positions are going to be performing when the players' interviews with the teams are going to be, the media availability, all that stuff as well. We'll continue to dive in. So if you're wondering what thresholds are, we're talking about that perfect area where Brian Gutey and his scouting staff, his front office staff, they think, okay, here is the parameters we need to work within at each individual position in terms of arm length, height, weight, all that stuff, right? So hopefully by the time the draft gets here, we got a really good grab on, all right, these guys are the perfect athletic threshold fits for the Packers, which you guys know you can identify on our draft board with the I heart emoji. All right. So before we get into everything, if y'all would do that YouTube stuff for me, smash that like button, hit subscribe, click the bell icon. If this is your first time tuning into PTA, we appreciate you making us a part of your morning. We're not experts. We're not insiders. We're not media members. We're fan driven. Just like you, we are fans talking Packers on a daily basis. So if you're looking for that kind of vibe, that kind of content, make sure you hit subscribe and click the bell icon for us as well. Got a bunch of people already in the chat. Appreciate y'all swinging through. Jen right in here before everybody. Good to see you, Jen. We got Mike Berry. We got Rob in the house. What's up, Rob? Good to see you, buddy. We got OS Plays in the house. We got Jake in here. What's up, Jake? And Coach Lynn, of course, grabbing that coffee, getting up, talking some ball with us. Appreciate everybody swinging through. So let's jump into it, man. Let's talk about what Wendell Ferreira and Brian Maffey talked about. I hope I'm pronouncing Brian's last name right. I think it's Maffey. He's a big athletic threshold guy, big draft coverage guy here for the Packers, and likes to kind of lay out, all right, here are the parameters that the Packers like to work within. You guys know how I feel. And I don't know how anybody who covers the threshold, maybe they disagree with Gutey as well. I'm like, man, give me the best football player. I don't care if this guy's 1 inch taller than that guy. Now, if they're in the same tier and you need a cluster buster, that's different, right? If you got a guy, let's say that you've got three cornerbacks that you like, right? And they're all in the same tier of talent. And you look at it and say, okay, how do we decide between these three? If you want to use athletic threshold as the cluster buster, that's cool. I'm okay with that. And meaning like, okay, this guy meets all of our athletic thresholds. This guy only has two. That guy only has one. Let's go get that guy right there. Now, if you've got three cornerbacks, let's say, since cornerback is one of the top needs for the Packers this year in the draft, if you've got three cornerbacks that they all three meet the athletic threshold. Okay, so you think, okay, man, they all three are in the same tier of talent. They all meet the same athletic threshold. Then you can move on to your second wave of cluster busters if athletic threshold is the most important. For me, it's not the most important thing, personally. Now, when you're talking about 40 time potentially being the cluster buster, that makes all the sense in the world. Maybe agility is. Maybe it's going back to the tape and ball tracking. Which one is the better ball tracker here, right? All those things can come into play as well. So, again, I don't look at athletic threshold like, oh my gosh, it's so important that this matches up perfectly. However, like Brian and Wendell and these other guys have talked about year in and year out, you can tell it means a lot to Brian Gutekunst. Now, some would say at the detriment of the Packers that he puts too much emphasis on that type of stuff, right? But let's dive into it here again. And just a little excerpt from their article here with Wendell Ferreira. He said the Green Bay Packers must add cornerbacks both for depth and high-end talent, despite what General Manager Brian Gutekunst said publicly. Now, without a first-round pick and with the salary cap constraints, it may be hard to find a day one starter. Well, the good news is this draft class is perfectly aligned with what the Packers have, and in that and in the area where they have enough capital to get it, because it's a strong day two class is what he's talking about here. Okay, a strong day two class. Now, timeout, pause. That's what Wendell said, right? And just like me and anyone else, one person isn't the grand poobah, right? However, cross-check that. Former NFL scout Daniel Jeremiah, what did he say? A lot of day two starters at the cornerback position. Lines up perfectly with what Wendell Ferreira is saying here, okay? So as we go through here and look at some of the thresholds, and I had a report just kind of pulled here off the internet. Now, listen, some of these may be a little off in your eyes. Some people will say, well, no, they actually prioritize arm length over height, or maybe they prioritize height over weight, or maybe they prioritize 40-yard dash over height. I'm not doing a podcast. I'm not on social media to argue with people and trying to split hairs and having a pissing contest. It's just not how I fan, right? I would rather just hit mute and move on. That's just how I roll in that regard. So here are some of the metrics, okay, that understand this doesn't mean that this is follow this to a T, but this is a good little example. Threshold confirmation for cornerback, all right? So within the article that they wrote, right there, talking about some of the height, weight requirements and things like that, right? What we're going to do is show you the historical threshold. And as we move forward to other positions, we'll kind of give you a ballpark there as well. Okay, so height, you've got 5'10" and a half being the minimum, with 6 foot being ideal. The historical threshold, 5'10" and 1/8 of an inch is the minimum there at the cornerback position. Okay, weight, 190 pounds is the minimum, is what they're saying. 193 pounds is ideal, but the outlier, we have drafted players that were 184 pounds. So you can see the 190-pound threshold doesn't mean, nope, they're completely off the board if they're below that. It's just what do they like? What is the preference, right? And that's where we've got to really kind of decide where we want the athletic threshold to fall on our draft board. And I'll show you the board here in a second. Arm length, 31 inches, okay? Historical threshold at the minimum, 31 inches. 40-yard dash, 4.55. is the max, okay? But they're looking for ideally sub 4.540, okay? Now, in the 4.5s, what was the outlier? You guys remember Jackson. I'm trying to think of his name. Who was it? Josh Jackson, right? Yeah, right there it is right there, the Josh Jackson rule. So Josh Jackson was very high on people's draft boards. Some people thought he was going to be a first-round pick, and he kept dropping and dropping, right? So why did the Packers reach outside of their normal threshold to get Josh Jackson, who ran a 4.56? Because he was probably so high on their board, it made sense at the time. All right, we're going to take him in spot of the 40-yard dash, right? And that's what I'm talking about. You got to be kind of flexible in that regard. 3-cone drill, 6.96 is the max, ideally 6.86. And of course, the historical threshold and the minimum, they were willing to go in the 7s in the past, according to this report. Okay, so you got the Josh Jackson rule. Josh Jackson, the source confirms that Josh Jackson, 4.56, remains the only cornerback drafted by Gutey to exceed the 4.50 mark. And his lack of success has reinforced the need for speed. So again, that was when they went outside of that threshold a little bit, and it did not work out. Really surprising that Josh Jackson wasn't a better football player. He had a ton of interceptions. I want to say he played for Iowa. We're going back some time now. But I was excited about the Josh Jackson pick. It did not work out, obviously. Agility over explosion. While the Packers generally love explosive testers, which is basically a combination of broad jump and vertical jump, that gives you your explosion grade. The first time I ever heard explosion grade mentioned was way back in the day with Pat Kerwin, former executive with the Jets, who went on to do Moving the Chains on Sirius NFL Radio in its early days. He always talked about explosion grade. If you guys have read the book, Take Your Eye Off the Ball, which I've recommended many, many times to listeners like, hey, man, I want to start diving into football a little deeper. Start there. It may be too light for you, but you get through that book, now you're ready to take the next step and go, okay, let's really press in and geek out over football. So he talked about explosion grade there. That's a combination of broad jump and vertical jump, all right? Also, the article highlighted that for cornerbacks, they specifically prioritize 3-cone agility to ensure they can mirror receivers in man coverage. So maybe that is the top. According to Brian Maffey and, of course, Wendell Ferreira, that's one of the top things that's on their list, if that makes sense. So that is a look at the cornerback spot. Okay, now they mentioned in their article here, I'm going to drop this down for just a second. They mentioned in their article that they have earmarked a handful of day 2 cornerbacks, and that's what I wanted to get to on this particular segment here. They've got some day 2 cornerbacks that they've kind of earmarked. Now you're going to notice that on our board, we're going to start to add heart eye emojis. Okay. What does that mean? That means Gutey has got the googly eyes, the old googly eyes for these specific players. And these are the players that Mafi and, of course, Wendell Ferreira mentioned. All right. Chris Johnson, surprise, surprise, at the top of the list here, right? Saying he may be available at 52. Now, listen, this doesn't mean that these other guys that are ranked higher won't have the threshold emoji, okay? This just simply, they're talking about potential day two picks, second and third round picks, okay? At the top of the list, Chris Johnson, he checks the boxes. We got a 36.1 grade on him, which means he's worthy of the 36th pick. However, he's probably a little bit higher than that on our board last I checked. 34 is actually where he sits on our board, okay? So notice D'Angelo Pons isn't mentioned, right? Now, again, this isn't personal preference. I've been very vocal about this. I love football players. I love good football players who are going to go out there and lay the freaking pop on offensive players. I love guys who have good football instincts. I don't want to say I could care less about size. Again, if it's a cluster buster, I'm all about it, okay? If you've got D'Angelo Pons and Chris Johnson are sitting there, Chris Johnson's higher on our board and he meets the athletic threshold. If they've got the same grade, which they don't, let's say they did, I would go with Chris Johnson over D'Angelo Pons because it matters. It does. However, if D'Angelo Pons was 2 tiers higher than Chris Johnson and he doesn't meet the athletic threshold, me personally, I will go get D'Angelo Pons. Okay. Because how many times have we drafted freaks? You guys remember Kevin King and his height? Wow. Look how tall this corner is. Holy cow. Cheeks. So why did we reach? Why did we go get him? What did we fall in love with there? The tape wasn't off the charts enough to be one of the premier cornerbacks. It's because he had that height. He had that arm length, right? If I remember correctly, his arm length matched with his height. But nonetheless, that's what we mean by Gutey. Just because we like a guy on our board, just because they're higher on our board. Like, let me give you an example here. One of the guys that was mentioned in the article was Brandon Cease. I think that's how you say his name, out of South Carolina, cornerback out of South Carolina. Now, it's a perfect example. Now, I think Brian even mentioned in the article that he did not like his fluidity. He lacked fluidity, so he wasn't like one of his personal favorites, but he did mention him as a potential threshold fit. So, for example, if D'Angelo Pons is sitting there at 52 and we got a 40.4 grade on him, and Brandon Cease is sitting there at 52, we got a 46.3. Hands down, D'Angelo Pons is the better prospect on our board, right? He's a national champion, on and on and on and on, right? However, more times than not, Gutey would take a Brandon Cease over a D'Angelo Pons because the threshold is there. And that's where I disagree with Gutey. If they're in the same tier, I'm okay with it. But clearly, D'Angelo Pons, as it sits right now on February 23rd, D'Angelo Pons has a better draft grade on our board than Cease. I would take Pons. We know Gutey wouldn't. There's a good example. Now, moving along, Julian Neal's another name that's gotten mentioned, and 80.5 is his grade. So to me, personally, 52, too much of a reach. But at 84, Julian Neal's a name that keeps popping up. He gets the early emoji there in terms of the threshold. So Julian Neal is a player that I would keep my eye on around the 84 spot. Now, he may go to the combine and absolutely crush it. If he crushes it at the combine, you may see him spike up. Here's the beautiful thing about our board. Other people may say, oh, he's a first-round talent. The most he can get in terms of an RAS bonus, i.e. the combine/pro day bonuses, is 5 points. That would move him up at a maximum of 75.5. Some people may see him as a first-round pick. On our board, he will not reach any higher than a 75.5, and I love to keep it that way. And if people disagree with that, that's okay. We can agree to disagree. Then what you need to do is pull the consensus big board. You need to pull the PFF big board because they're constantly moving those guys way up and down, depending on the draft buzz. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I want our board to stay steady, stay true, hold as true as possible to how people felt about these prospects as soon as the tape was fresh, right after the college football season. Now, some people haven't had a chance to dive into these prospects, and I get that. I don't care. I would rather err on the side of if they're at the top of our board, guys, if they're at the top of our board, and you're going to see some players go, wow, we got them way higher than other people do, right? Yeah, it's because we chose not to drop them down too far because they ran a weird-looking 40-yard dash. Let me give you an example. Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton looked like the perfect prospect to us. We were like, oh, my God, this guy's a top 3 talent in the draft. And for whatever reason, when he ran his 40-yard dash, he ran it kind of sideways, and people, oh, my gosh, he's going to sink on boards. Now, he obviously didn't sink too far, but it was enough to prevent him from being considered a top 3 talent in the draft. That was crazy to me. It's a perfect example. Now, if he scored a 0 on the RES, he doesn't get penalized on our board. However, he doesn't get any kind of bonus, and other players are going to be getting bonuses and moving up past him. Hopefully that makes sense. So Julian Neal, another name to keep up with. Devin Marshall's another one they mentioned in the article, going to have good threshold. We got a 130.2 on him. We're talking 5th or 6th round for it to make sense for me. He obviously was at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Did not get any kind of bonus there, to the best of my knowledge. Another one mentioned is Will Lee. He's significantly lower at 163.3, maybe a late round guy that the Packers may like because of his size and his threshold, obviously out of Texas A&M there. He was at the Senior Bowl as well. Going down the list, way down the list, you got Thaddeus Dixon at 206.4. Charles Demings out of Stephen F. Austin. He is in the he's got a 223 grade for us. Colin Wright out of Stanford has got a 252.7 for us. Okay, so that's just a handful of names to keep an eye on that the Packers may have a really, really close grip in terms of maybe wanting to interview them at the combine and things like that. And we'll continue to add those cheese emojis in whenever the Packers do meet with those specific players. Now, the one thing I do want to mention, out of all those thresholds that we mentioned at the cornerback position that Wendell Ferreira and Brian mentioned in their article together, there's only one that had an All-Star Week bonus. Guess who it was? Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson, guys, is the name that keeps popping up this year where I go, man, if he's there at 52, and I don't know if he will be. He may not last that long, but if Chris Johnson out of San Diego State's there at 52, run the damn card. I'd be all about it. So that's a quick look at the cornerback position. If you guys are watching this video back later, let me know in the comments, how do you feel about the cornerback position and the thresholds that we just talked about? What do you think about Chris Johnson? Maybe you like Brandon Cease over Chris Johnson. Maybe you like Julian Neal over both those guys. Maybe you'd rather wait and try to get one of them a little later in the draft. Maybe it's a Devin Marshall out of NC State. Maybe it's Malik Muhammad, who doesn't necessarily meet the threshold on the surface, but the Packers have already met with him at the Senior Bowl. Let us know in the comments what you think. Hit that like button for us. Hit subscribe. Click the bell icon as well as we get closer to the NFL draft. We appreciate y'all. All right, let's move along, gang, to the next topic here at hand. And we're going to go back to the information that I had posted on our Patreon group. And again, you guys can find this over at patreon.com/Packer Fan Total Access. This is just one of the extra perks of being a member of our Patreon group. A little extra added value is really designed just for people that wanted to support the show a little bit more. That's a way to do so. I want to give a shout out to, man, I'm not prepared to do it, but I'm going to try to pull it up here on the fly because I definitely want to give a big thank you. We got a new member here on Patreon, actually the $5 tier. And again, he gets nothing extra for the $5 tier, just wanted to be generous. And that's Justin Earl, if I'm saying the name correctly. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you jumping on board there. I know we had Mike on the 9th. We had Janice that recently jumped in. Greg jumped in here. So greatly appreciate the extra support. And pretty cool that you've got an option too to just pay up for the year. That way it saves you a little bit of money and you don't have to worry about that payment hitting at certain times and all that. So again, patreon.com/Packer Fan Total Access. All right, let's talk offensive line here. All right. Offensive line is really interesting because again, what's the threshold for center? What's the threshold for guard? What's the threshold for tackle? To the best of my knowledge, guys, the best way of looking at this is the Packers kind of take all offensive linemen and throw them in the same pot. That's essentially what ends up happening. Like the times that they've drafted a safety or a center, obviously they drafted Josh Myers and it was a swing and a miss. They took him over Creed Humphrey, right? But they took Elton Jenkins, who was a center at Mississippi State, and they moved him to guard. Well, why did they move him to guard? Maybe his arms were a little bit longer. We'd have to go back and check the tape, right? But when you kind of look at how they approach the offensive line, it's like all of them as a whole. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm not saying I agree with that at all. And again, the big thing that gets argued about during draft season when it comes to offensive linemen, and specifically with the Green Bay Packers, is they look at arm length like it's the gospel. And, there is a lot of, how do I say this? There's a lot of smoke to that fire. There's a lot of evidence that suggests the Packers do think that arm length is absolutely crucial, right? Brian Bulaga had short arms. He was a great offensive tackle. Now, here's the problem with Bulaga. They drafted him. I think he was a left tackle at Iowa. They tried to play him at guard. He was not a guard. And then they moved him all the way across the line to right tackle. This is what I mean when people that try to blame LaFleur for how the offensive line is moving around and how they cross-train and this and that. If it's a LaFleur thing, then it was a McCarthy thing too, okay? because this has been going on far, long before Matt LaFleur ever became the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. This has been an issue. The Josh Sitton comment we always talk about, right? Talking about if you want to know how difficult it is to go from the left side of the line to the right side of the line, try wiping with the opposite hand. That was all pre-Matt LaFleur. You understand what I'm saying? So this is something that organizationally, systemically, I guess you could say, this is how they approach offensive line and their evaluation. It goes all the way back to Ted Thompson. And then, of course, Brian Gutekunst's taken over for him. It's continued. So here's the threshold that we're talking about, all right? Offensive line athletic thresholds. And again, you guys go double check these. There may be a few numbers off, but you guys do your own research. This is giving you a good general idea, all right? So the minimum threshold for height is 6'4". Ideally for offensive linemen, the Packers want 6'4.5" to 6'5.5". That's been kind of the sweet spot, all right? Weight, the minimum is 300 pounds. The ideal or preferred weight is 305 to 315. Now they've stayed lighter at offensive line for a long time. Last year with Anthony Belton, they went outside of their threshold, if I remember correctly, because he was a lot bigger offensive lineman. I want to say Aaron Banks too was a bigger offensive lineman, which they were obviously trying to get a little more stout in the trenches. That was the goal there, right? Arm length. Here's the big trigger point. You ready? 33.25 inches for the tackle position. So if an offensive lineman, if we draft an offensive lineman and his arm length isn't 33.25, they're probably not good. They probably don't consider them a tackle. That's why when you get into like Brian Parker and Jennings Donker and some of these guys, make sure you pay attention to their arm length when they measure at the combine, because when they're drafted, you can automatically think, okay, even though they play tackle, they're probably going to play guard, which I think we would all agree that's what the Packers do in general. They love drafting tackles because of the footwork and the skill set and try to play them at guard. Okay. It doesn't mean it's going to work, but that's what they like to do. Now, elite, ideal / preferred, the elite length of arms is 34 inches. If you get a guy who's got 34 inches, both on, if I remember correctly, I think this holds true with the edge defender room as well, maybe even defensive tackles, but offensive line specifically, 34 inches, elite arm length. That's what you're looking for in terms of an offensive lineman that fits the Packers, that they're, okay, we're willing to we'll probably bump him up on their board a little bit if they got elite arm length. And the reason being, guys, whether we think it's important or not, it's the first one to the punch typically wins. If you can outpunch, it's just like boxing. I love boxing. I'm a big boxing fan. Now the sport has went absolutely into the crap tank, but I used to love, especially in the 90s, just watching boxing. They talk about the tail of the tape and arm length. It's absolutely huge. Why? Because they can reach you at a longer distance. They can kind of keep you at bay. They can keep them from getting too strong into you from a blocking standpoint, right? The same thing holds true in football with pass blocking. Okay, so arm length, if I can get my hands on you without you getting your hands on me, I'm automatically at the advantage. Now, here's the problem. If that guy, even though you got your hands on them quicker, if they're stronger, they're going to push you right back in the pocket. If they're more agile and your footwork sucks, the arm length doesn't matter. And that's where I differ with Gutey and some of the arm length stuff, because Brian Bulaga was a great tackle, right? Many people considered, well, he's not going to be any good because his arms were too short. Okay, it's obvious that he was strong enough at the point of attack and he had good enough footwork and mechanics that the arm length didn't matter. He went on to have a great career in the National Football League. So just another example there. 3-cone drill. The absolute max that's listed here is 770. Okay, 770 is the absolute max. Sub 760 is the ideal or preferred range there for a 3-cone drill for the offensive lineman. Short shuttle 475, sub 450 is what they're looking for in the short shuttle. The threshold, the minimum 475. So you can kind of see where players are going to fall within these parameters for the Packers. 40-yard dash, 520 is the minimum threshold, but the sub 5.05 is preferred. And then, of course, the RAS score, like we talked about, at least early in the draft, we know RAS, relative athletic score, 8.0 is kind of the cutoff there for Gutey. He loves those 8.0s and higher. However, ideally, rounds 1 through 3, they typically go with athletic thresholds of 9+. And that's where we talked about where you're prioritizing some of those, like the RAS score over the tape maybe. And they'll never tell you that. But listen, the proof's in the pudding. We can see the guys you're drafting. You're going for the athletic freaks for the most part. Now, Anthony Belton, I want to say last year, scored in the 7s, I think. So that was a little odd in the second round that they went away from threshold, but they definitely went size there, right? And then they tried to play him over at right guard. So hopefully he takes a step forward this year. Keynotes here, the short arm guard shift. If a tackle prospect measures under the 33 and a quarter inch arm threshold, the Packers almost universally project them inside to guard or center. Look at Jordan Morgan. Look at Sean Ryan. Now Jordan Morgan is going to be probably playing left tackle unless a stud tackle falls to you and that's your starting left tackle and they continue to play Jordan Morgan inside. So again, don't want to be negative. How can I say this and be somewhat tactful? We seen Jordan Morgan play guard and it wasn't great. He played his best football at tackle, really on both sides of the line. But in preseason at left tackle, he looked great. The last 4 weeks of the season, he played tackle. And that was hands down his most consistent, most impressive play of the year was that 4-game stretch playing tackle. His arms are shorter is why they kicked him into guard. So this whole time we've been playing a guy out of position because his arms are 3/4 of an inch too short or whatever the actual measurement is. What are we doing? What are we doing here? You know? So, again, that's where I want to deviate away from that a little bit if it's me. Agility over everything. The Packers value the 3-cone and short shuttle more than any other position group to ensure the lineman has the lateral recovery speed required for their pass blocking scheme. Makes a lot of sense there. Don't hate it. Weight ceiling. It says, unlike many teams, the Packers have an unofficial upper limit around 321 pounds. They rarely draft mammoth linemen, preferring dancing bears who can move in space. Dancing bears. That sounds like one of Jacob's shows he does out at the club on Saturday nights. So that's just a quick look at the threshold of the offensive line. Now let's jump over to the draft board and let's try to sort by our draft board by offensive linemen here. We already got it graded out. So let's just go down to offensive linemen. Now we've got ours separated, of course. And once the thresholds start to hit, we're going to move a lot of guys around. Like right now at interior offensive line, some of the guys at the top of the list is Lone, offensive lineman out of Memphis. He's the top guard. You got Emmanuel Prignon, a guard out of Oregon. He's the second best guard. Now that drops off significantly from 15.1 to 46.8. So there's a chance there might be a guard there when you pick 52 that makes a lot of sense. Who knows? Another interior offensive lineman is Connor Liu. He's a center. We got him lit up red because he's coming back from an ACL. He most likely will not be ready week 1. That's why he's in the red. Next is Jake Slaughter. We got Jake Slaughter at a 68.6. All right. Chase Basantis at guard, Texas A&M, 73.4. Brian Parker played tackle at Duke. He is projecting as a guard and a center. Most people see him as a center. The Packers actually met with him. This looks like one of those prime pickings. Well, where would he be taken at? We got an 82.4 on him. That lines up almost perfectly with 84, right? The Packers did meet with him at the East-West Shrine Bowl, I believe it was. Pat Coogan, center out of Indiana, former Notre Dame, 84.8. That would make a lot of sense at 84 if you want to take him. However, most mock drafts, this is a perfect example. Our board, we have an 84.8 on him grade, meaning he's worthy of the 84th pick. He's probably a little bit higher on our board than that. And there's a lot of consensus big boards and mock drafts that they've got him like in the 150s and 160s, which is wild. So again, why is he higher on ours? When we've got the data down, consensus big board had him at 140. PFF big board had him at 144. He's the 12th highest graded center in all of college football last year. He's gotten better every year. 159 at his position, 43 at his position, and then 12. He's ascending as he's entering the league. I'd be totally fine with the Pat Coogan a little bit later in the draft for sure. And then the next guard at the 102.7 is Billy Scrouth out of Notre Dame as well, a little bit lower on the board there. Now let's slide on down and look at offensive tackle. All right. Offensive tackle is lit up green because it's a tier 1 position of importance. Guys, there's going to be names on this list that end up getting moved over to the guard spot. Okay. Just know that. Okay. They're going to get moved to the guard spot because of arm length. We'll go ahead and convert those over and just kind of show, all right, look, guys, what we'll probably do is offensive tackle / guard, or maybe we'll put offensive tackle in parentheses in the name. That way, he played tackle at college. We may go that route. So Spencer Fano, 9.9 at the top of the list. And you got Francis Mwaga out of Miami at a 10.9. You got Caden Proctor out of Alabama, 20.8. Monroe Frilling out of Georgia at a 30.6. And then you got Caleb Lomu, tackle out of Utah at a 36.8. You got Blake Miller, 39.6 on our big board. Here is the grade. Blake Miller is the first one that's kind of fallen to us. I'm interested to see what his arm length is going to be. Maybe they've already measured it at the Senior Bowl and I've missed it. We'll start to get that data in for you guys. But I do know that out of Clemson. The only thing that hurts that bothers me about this is he played for Clemson. It's like how much, what was the level of talent they actually played? We know the ACC is a bit of a cluster right now, right? Jennings Dunker, the Packers met with 51.3. I'd be okay with Jennings Dunker at 52. Now, when we did our mock draft the other night, there was like several players that were higher on our board, right? One being Chris Johnson, I believe we end up taking. That makes a lot more sense than Jennings Dunker. However, Jennings Dunker is not going to make the 84. I feel comfortable saying that. Next, you got Max Ihanakor out of Arizona State. He's got a 53.5 on him. Caleb Tiernan out of Northwestern, a 56.8. Delby Lemieux out of Dartmouth. That's going to be really interesting to see where Delby Lemieux goes because it's a very, very small school. There's a lot of missing data on him, but he graded out well. 25th, 22nd, 9th. PFF does not have him on their big board, and then he's 228 on the consensus big board. We got a 71.0 grade on him. Austin Barber out of Florida, 84.6. Isaiah World, 95.7. Those are the guys within the top 10. Another interesting prospect to keep an eye on. I marked in blue and put a question mark with a center on it. Trey Zune was listed as a tackle out of Texas A&M, and I've heard a lot of people say he's going to play center in the NFL. So we're going to do a little extra research there, and we'll get you a definitive answer on whether he's going to play there or not. So that's just kind of a quick look at the offensive line grouping, I guess you could say, when it comes to the draft this year and talking about the thresholds that are going to meet. We're going to get those emojis in on the draft board for everybody in the Patreon group so you know which of these offensive line are in the ballpark. I try not to be too like, nope, he barely didn't make it, so cut him off the list. If it's pretty close, I want us to go, okay, there's no reason to look away from the threshold, right? However, if there's a player that's at the top of the board, we go, that makes all the sense in the world, and there's no I heart emoji, it's like, Gutey's probably going to pass on him. I want to know that information on draft night so we can kind of have a conversation about it in real time. But let us know what you think about the offensive line class and the threshold talk in general. Hit us up in the comments. Make sure you hit like, hit subscribe, click the bell icon so you catch all the future live streams. All right, let's move it along here, gang. Let's talk about one more position, and that is defensive tackle. All right, defensive tackle. Let me drop this down, go back to the article. We're working overtime today. My gosh, a lot of jumping back and forth. So back to our athletic threshold grouping here. Let's go defensive tackle. Here are the athletic thresholds for defensive tackle. Minimum threshold for height is 6'1.5". However, ideally, they're looking for 6'3" to 6'5" for their defensive tackle. So 6'1.5" is the minimum threshold for defensive tackle. Weight. If somebody's in the 280s, like there was a player out of Navy, and the other day somebody said, oh, nope, he's too light. Okay, well, we've drafted defensive tackles at 287 before. Are we going to say 4 pounds is going to be too light? We can't get a couple cheese curds in that cat? If he's higher on our board, I'd much rather have the better football player from what the tape says as opposed to, oh, no, he's lacking 3 pounds of weight. I can't subscribe to that. Ideally, however, they do like 300 to 315 pounds, okay? Arm length, 32 inches. Okay, 32 inches is the minimum threshold for defensive linemen. They want them to be able to beat the offensive lineman to the point of attack. Okay, remember what we talked about with threshold arm length at offensive line. Arm length for offensive line, 33.25, right? Well, they're saying when it comes to defensive tackle, 32 inches is the minimum threshold. However, 33 plus is ideal for the Packers. 40-yard dash, 5.15. Although it's preferred, who wouldn't prefer to have an elite 40-yard dash in the sub-5s for a big old 300-pound defensive tackle, right? 10-yard split, 175 is the minimum. Ideally, 168 is the 10-yard split. And the 10-yard split, guys, real simple. When they run the 40-yard dash, they laser time segments of the 40-yard dash. So you got the overall 40-yard dash, okay? And you got the 10-yard split. And I think what's the other one? A 20-yard split, I believe it is, right? So the 10-yard split is showing you acceleration, how quick they get through the first 10 yards. You don't need an offensive lineman to run 40 yards. How many plays are you hoping your offensive lineman has to run 40 yards? You know, you want them to handle the point of attack, and your running back hit the hole and gone, and the offensive lineman is out of the equation now, right? So again, that's why 10-yard split I think is way more important than obviously 40-yard dash. Now, why is 40-yard dash important with offensive linemen? Footwork. If they've got a good 40-yard dash, it typically means that they've got fast feet. That's what that means, okay? That means that they can get 1 foot down quicker. Think of a kick step, right? When you do a kick slide and you're pass blocking it at the left tackle or right tackle position, your footwork has to be quick. sometimes that can be measured within a 40-yard dash, or at least maybe it's more of a tiebreaker as opposed to the 10-yard split. That's obviously more important, especially if you're wanting to get into duo, right? Think of the 10-yard split on a duo run call where it's double-double, vertical power, right? So you go double-double, you're double team at the point of attack, and you need that quick burst, get to the next level, and peel off and take a backer out of the play or a spur safety. Those are the things that the 10-yard split plays a big role in. Now, explosion grade, remember, is vertical jump and broad jump. Vertical jump wise, the minimum threshold for the Packers have been 29 inches. The ideal preferred threshold is 31.5 inches, okay, plus. The broad jump, 9-foot broad jump, but ideally a 9'4" plus is the preferred. Okay, so again, the broad jump being a 9-foot is the minimum threshold. 3-cone drill for agility and obviously footwork. 790 is the minimum. A sub 765 is ideal for the defensive tackle position, right? And in terms of getting off the ball and being able to take control of an offensive lineman, when you're talking about the footwork, right? We were talking about the kick slide just now on the opposite side with offensive linemen, their ability to be able to move their feet and get out there, right? Well, with defensive tackle, the same thing kind of applies. Whoever has the quicker feet, the longer arms, and the more punch to their more power to their punch, right? The pass rush moves, yes, they matter. They do. But if you can't rush with power, Greg Cosell 101, if you can't rush with power, you're not going to make it in the NFL, okay? You've got to be able to rush with power, and then you can work, if you've got speed and agility like Micah Parsons in combination with power, that's awesome. That's a slam dunk pick. Those guys are usually not available outside of the top 5, right? But yeah, you want power. If you had to choose between power or quickness at defensive tackle, hands down, it's power for me. I could care way less about how quick your feet are if you can just take a guard and a center and push them right into the lap of the quarterback, right? That's what Walter Nolan did so well in college. That's what Jalen Carter did so well in college. And again, I don't see it at that level with Peter Woods, but many people are saying Peter Woods is very, very comparable to Jalen Carter. I think it's more about the height and weight than anything else. And then, of course, when you get into the RAS, 8+ is the minimum there for the Packers. And then the ideal / preferred threshold is 9.3 plus. Guys, they take very, very serious in Green Bay that RAS score when it comes to defensive tackles. Now, when I say RAS, I don't think that Gutey has the RAS stuff pulled up. He may have RAS off to the side, but they've got their own version of RAS is what we're talking about. RAS is a tool that we can use, okay, that probably best mimics what the Packers probably use in terms of athletic thresholds. And they may only be keen on 3 or 4 specific things as opposed to the entire relative athletic scorecard. But that's kind of what we use to determine. And of course, you can cross-check this stuff, right, with what Math Bomb's done over the years. And you can see that the Packers love 8+ RASs. Now, let's talk about past defensive tackles here, right? Explosion over agility. Just a couple notes, key notes from this little breakdown. Unlike the offensive line where the 3-cone is king, the Packers prioritize the 10-yard split and broad jump for defensive tackles. Again, quickness off the ball and explosion. They want immediate get off to disrupt the pocket. All right. The Devontae Wyatt profile. You guys know when they took Devontae Wyatt, he was a little bit older, and all the draft gurus were like, they'll never draft Wyatt. He's too old. Lo and behold, they drafted him, right? Now, they don't talk about that now. They just move on to the next year and say they'll never draft him. He's too old, but it is what it is. Wyatt's RAS, guys, was a 9.59 according to this report. It's the blueprint for their interior pass rushers. Compact, but with elite speed and jumping numbers. Again, explosion, quickness, agility, quick twitch, and you got to be able to handle the point of attack. Devontae Wyatt is a good pass rusher, good to very good pass rusher. The run defense is what struggled there, right? Now, the big citrus outlier, while they prefer sub 315 pounds for mobility, they will break the weight threshold for unique space eaters like TJ Slayton or the 2026 prospect, Dominic Big Citrus Orange. Where's my boy Chris in the chat? I know he's in here. Look, T'Vondre Sweat son. There you go. Perfect example, right? Perfect example. T'Vondre Sweat, stud of a pick. People were like, oh, he's not going to be quick enough. He's too big. He's out of shape. Been a great football player. Needs to stay healthy, but been a great football player. So here's Big Citrus, Chris, your boy. So or the 2026 prospect Dominic Orange, provided they still show functional explosiveness. So it's important, that last part, right, Chris? If Big Sit, if he goes out there, right, Big Citrus, if he goes out there at the combine and he shows explosiveness, you're going to see him probably start to skyrocket. Now, where do we got Big Citrus? We've got him number 99 on our board last I checked. So would you be willing to take him at 84? If you like him enough, yeah. Maybe the Packers have him at 54, right? And we've got him at 99. They'll obviously run the card at 84. So again, I'm not saying my board is perfect. Our board is perfect. I am saying, though, that if Gutey's board lines up to take Big Citrus, hell, even at 52, he may have a 30 grade on him. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me because our boards haven't matched up in the past. Unfortunately, our board has been a little more accurate here recently than where Gutey is actually taking guys, right? So we'll see how that continues to shake out. So that's a quick look at the profiles. Now let's jump over one last time to our draft board and give you guys an idea of some of the top prospects at defensive tackle. We roll back up. So at defensive line, again, it's lit up green because it's a tier 1 position of importance. At the top of the list, you've got Caden McDonald at a 25.3. You've got Caleb Banks at 28.6. Peter Woods at 34.0. Now, people are going, Clayton, Peter Woods is your third best defensive tackle. Why are you down on him? I'm not down on Peter Woods. I'm just not. It's going to be really, really hard for people to sell me that Peter Woods is as good as Walter Nolan was. If Peter Woods is as good as Jalen Carter was. Jalen Carter was like a top 5 prospect on our board. He sank for personal issues, right? Off the field stuff, so to speak. A little bit of on the field stuff too. You seen it this year. He got kicked out of a game week 1 because he spit in a player's face, right? So that's why he kind of sank a little bit. But I just don't see Peter Woods in the ballpark again on February 23rd. He may go to the combine and impress me and come out and I'll be like, cow, this dude's an athletic freak. Holy cow. Yeah. Now I can see the comps. But as it sits right now, the tape does not show me Peter Woods playing against lesser talent in the ACC as opposed to Walter Nolan in the SEC, right? And Jalen Carter in the SEC as well. Like, I'm just not sold on Peter Woods that much. I'm really not. Now, Kristen Miller is one of my draft crushes. So I've got Peter Woods higher than Kristen Miller. If I had to pick between Peter Woods and Kristen Miller, I'm probably going Peter Woods, okay, because if you're sticking to the board. But when we did the breakdown the other day and I kind of talked about this, I can understand why people would like Kristen Miller better than Peter Woods. Why do I like Kristen Miller personally better than Peter Woods, even though he's higher on the board? Let me explain. We talk about ascending players, right? Let's start with Peter Woods. In 2023, Peter Woods was the 12th highest graded defensive tackle in all of college football. All right, that's solid, borderline top 10. Kristen Miller was 303. Oh my God, that's horrible, right? Well, look at this. In 2024, Peter Woods dropped from 12th to 26th, while Kristen Miller at Georgia jumped from 303 all the way to 33. All right, well, still, Peter Woods is the better football player there, right? He's got the better grade, according to PFF. Look at 2025. He dropped to 206, all right? And Kristen Miller went from 33 to 18. So what you're seeing with Kristen Miller is ascension. He gets better every single year in college football. The opposite with Peter Woods, according to PFF, he's gotten a little bit worse every year. Now, again, can an NFL coaching staff pull this player from 2023 out of Peter Woods as opposed to 2025 Peter Woods? Hell yeah. And that's why maybe you like him a little bit more. Now, the reason he's higher on our board, Peter Woods, is because the consensus big board had him at 12. They had Kristen Miller at 33. The PFF big board had him at 9. We had him at 30. And again, this is as soon as the college football season wrapped up, before all the hype trains started. Peter Woods now is probably through the freaking roof even more. I don't know. I try not to look at it as much once the board begins to get built. Now, let's go to our head scouts here. All right, Daniel Jeremiah. Daniel Jeremiah has Peter Woods at 34, Kristen Miller at 37. Okay, so he says they're right there in the same tier. However, Peter Woods, I would give the nod to. Tankathon had Peter Woods 16th, and Kristen Miller 42nd. So that's pulling Kristen Miller down. If you remove Tankathon, Kristen Miller probably surpasses Peter Woods here. It'd be real close, but there's only 1.8 points between the two, okay? So again, Tankathon thinks the world of Peter Woods. Daniel Jeremiah had him at 34. Tankathon had him at 16. Dane Brugler has him at 33 and Kristen Miller at 37, the same spot as Daniel Jeremiah. So that's how you come up with the 35.8 score. That's going to be two names. I'm interested to see who goes first, Peter Woods or Kristen Miller in this year's draft. That's going to be really, really interesting to me. Next on the list is Lee Hunter. Lee Hunter's a 41.1. If he's there at 52, I'm okay with that pick, although it wouldn't be my top choice. It would make sense with the board, I'm sure. Darrell Jackson, the Packers have already met with him. We got an 86.0. Look for him maybe in the 84th pick, potentially. There's Big Citrus. We've got Big Citrus at 90.0, a little bit of a reach. We've got him in the 99 spot overall on our board. He'd be a little bit of a reach at 84, but you could probably sell me on that pick. Dante Corleone, 104.6. Grayson Halton, 120.6. The Packers met with Caleb Proctor, defensive tackle out of southeastern Louisiana. He's got a 122.5. And then Skylar Gill Howard is a name that we keep drafting late in the draft. We'll see if the threshold checks out as we get closer to the draft, but a 123.8 is what we have on him. Now, if we go down the list, the Packers also met with Landon Robinson from Navy. That's the guy we were talking about. We got a 198.0 grade on him, but again, an ascending player. 696 at his position in 23, jumped all the way to 338 in 24, all the way to 72 in 25. And I love my military academy players, man. Those dudes are just cut from the right freaking cloth, right? They're ass kickers is essentially what that means. 252 at the consensus big board, 270 on the PFF big board. That's what's bringing him down. So the Packers may be looking at him as kind of a priority undrafted free agent at the end of this draft, if that makes sense. So that's a quick breakdown of the defensive tackle position. If you guys are watching this back later, let me know in the comments. How do you feel about the defensive tackle spot and the players that we just mentioned specifically? Is there a player you like the most? Is there maybe one of these guys I'm higher on than you are? Let us know in the comments what you think. Hit that like button for us. Hit subscribe. Click the bell icon so you catch all the future live streams. Everybody in here that's live right now, if y'all would, do me a big favor and hit that like button for us on our way out as we get ready to wrap up. I see everybody in the chat, man. It's just so cool to see y'all in here talking draft. It's absolutely awesome, man. Absolutely awesome. Let's see what Mike Z has to say here. And this is where coaching is so important. Take the numbers or athletes and make them skilled and technically sound players. It's true, man. There's an aspect of that might be missing as well, right? Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they have to work with going into the season for sure, Mike. Let's see here. I think Chris was talking about Big Citrus, 84, no hire, Clayton. Talking about Big Citrus. So Chris the Casual In, the former, that was his former name. Now it's Chris in We Fence for Life. He is the president of the Big Citrus fan club. Okay. But he's even saying 84, that's a spot. Don't want to look at taking him 52. If I'm understanding correctly, that's who he was talking about there. So I can respect it, Chris. I can respect it. And then, let's see here. Number one Packer fan says Big Citrus bringing the juice. Love it. Love it. So Big Cit, man, he's definitely got the definitely got the best nickname in the entire draft this year to the best of my knowledge. So going to be a lot of fun, man. We're just getting started here. Also, let me flash this up on the screen real quick. I meant to do it earlier. Just give you guys a quick little update. So with the offseason schedule, this week, obviously, February 23rd through March the 2nd is the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana. I came close to going this year, but I would rather cover it here from the house and the studio and be able to get you guys kind of a lot quicker information in that regard. So, yeah, we got the Combine, and then March 3rd, 4 p.m. Eastern Time is the deadline for clubs to designate a franchise or transition tags. And then March 9th through the 11th is the legal negotiation period. Teams can talk to agents of unrestricted free agents, okay, but no contracts can be signed with the new teams yet. And then March 11 at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, the 2026 league year begins. Free agency officially opens, the trade window opens, and all 2025 player contracts expire, okay? March 29th through April the 1st is the annual league meeting in Phoenix, Arizona. So that's a quick look at that. Now, specifically with the Combine this week, it may be a little bit hard to read. You guys can pause the stream here so you can see it. You can also find it on NFL.com's website. On Sunday, February 22nd, yesterday was the early player arrivals. Today is going to be registration, pre-exam, orientation, and team interviews. Okay, so we may get some information coming out that teams met with this prospect, teams met with that prospect. Make sure you're following Easton Butler on X. He'll have all that information, okay? Tuesday of this week, you got general medical exam, pre-ordered studies, and then it says team interviews, okay? So more team interviews starting or continuing on Tuesday as well. Wednesday, you've got the ortho exam, media interviews, kicking workout, NFLPA meeting, and team interviews there. Then on Thursday, you got measurements and on-field workout. And then Friday, you're going to have bench press, and they're going to depart from Indianapolis. Those position groups that we just mentioned, that whole schedule right there, is going to be place kicker, defensive line, and linebacker. Okay, so that's their schedule. Now, just push it up a day. On Monday, the whole process, starting with early player arrivals, will begin for defensive backs and tight ends, and then they'll walk through the same process. They'll wrap up on Saturday. Okay, then next list, a grouping of players: running back, quarterback, and wideouts. Okay, they're going to start on Tuesday. The same process. They'll wrap up on Sunday. And then offensive line are going to be the last guys in the building here. They're going to come in on Wednesday, start the process, and then they'll wrap up on Monday with all their bench press and all that stuff. You got everything right here. Like, for example, we're looking at cornerbacks. We're probably going to be looking at measurements and 40 time, right? So if we go to DBs here, you're going to go register team interview. Team interviews will happen Tuesday for DBs, so maybe we'll get some stuff leaked out that the Packers met with, Chris Johnson. Maybe that'll happen, right? Wednesday is going to be the medical exam, the pre-order studies, and the team interviews as well. Thursday is going to be the ortho exam, the media interviews, NFLPA meeting, and team interviews. Friday is going to be measurements and on-field workout. So Friday is the big day for cornerbacks, safeties, and tight ends. Now, we say, hey, we're looking at a DB. We're looking at cornerbacks and tight ends, right? We're probably going to – I would like to see them draft one tight end a little later in the draft. You guys know Koziel is kind of my guy this year. We'll see if he sinks or drops to see how he does at the combine. His stock may go through the freaking roof if he runs a great 40 time, right? But all that stuff is going to happen Friday. And what we're going to do is bring you all that stuff in real time as news breaks. And pray for these guys, man. Hopefully there's no injuries, Unfortunately, we'll have to break that news if it happens. But, man, there's nothing worse than working your ass off your entire life to get to the point where you can finally have your dream come to reality and then get hurt at the combine. You just, man, pray over those kids. That would suck. But on Saturday with the DBs and the tight ends, you're actually going to have bench press, and you're going to have them depart Indianapolis on Saturday. So, again, even before that, though, the defensive linemen and the linebackers, there's also needs. So we're going to see what Big Citrus does on Thursday. Right? We're going to see how well he runs in the on-field workout and all that good stuff, right? And then, of course, the bench press on Friday, we'll see how much I don't know how to say it, how much strength he's got, I guess you could say, how much power that Big Citrus has got. And some of these other players as well. I'm going to keep a close eye on Kristen Miller to see if he improves his draft stock. So, again, that's just a quick look at the schedule for the combine. Guys, I've got to run. I got to get out of here. I got several appointments I got to hit. Greatly appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the chat. If y'all would, smash that like button. Make sure you're subbed to the channel. We'll go live again later today at some point if any kind of news breaks, or if we just want to get in here and maybe do a mock draft. I'll see what the guys are into and how we can work it out with everyone's schedule. But we greatly appreciate everybody hanging out. Hit that like button for us. We will be back a little later this afternoon. My name's Clayton. This is PTA. Go Pack, go.
Here we go.
We're out.
Bye, guys.